With a heavy heart, I watched Kevin pack his briefcase from the doorway of our bedroom. Our relationship seemed like a thick cloud that had descended upon our once contented house, strangling it with tension. My voice was barely audible when I spoke. I can't believe you're doing this. Kevin glanced up, his eyes icy. Amelia, what? Heading into the office. This family needs someone to keep things going. His words were a painful reminder of the choice I had made only a few days prior, cutting deep. I stepped back into the room. That's not fair, I said, anger simmering in my chest. I quit my job for us, for our family. His frustration showed as he snapped his briefcase shut. No, you left your work because the strain was too much for you. Now you want me to take up the slack. I winced at his words. It was true I had been struggling to adjust to being a stay-at-home mother. But I never anticipated Kevin's level of resentment. I'm trying, Kevin, I replied, my voice quivering. It's not easy to give up a career I loved. He sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. I'm not looking for a fight. We have some serious things to discuss tonight. The sound of little feet padding down the hallway interrupted us. Harriet, clutching her teddy bear with her golden locks ruffled, appeared in the doorway. Mommy, Daddy, why are you fighting? I knelt to her level and forced a smile. Dear, we're not fighting. Daddy and I were just talking. Kevin scooped her up and kissed her forehead. Your mom is right, princess. Everything is fine. Why don't you go find Grandma? She's probably making pancakes. As Harriet ran off, a tinge of regret hit me. How many times had her small ears heard our arguments? Kevin put down his briefcase, his face softening a bit. All right, tonight we'll talk. I have a suggestion that might help us get back on track. I nodded, unable to find my voice. I had an unshakable feeling that something was very wrong with us. As he left for work, I felt nervous about our upcoming conversation and what it might mean for our future. The day dragged on with dull chores and my in-laws' constant chatter. By the time Kevin returned home, the kids were asleep. After supper, we retired to the study. Breaking the silence, Kevin leaned forward. I've been thinking about how we can tackle some of our challenges, he began. I arched an eyebrow. With a small smile, he continued. What if we buy my parents a house with some of our savings? They could move closer, help with the kids more, and take up some of the burden. I felt the air disappear from the room. Our savings, the funds we set aside for our future, for the kids' college. Kevin's smile faded. I thought you'd be pleased. This solves a lot of our issues. I raised my voice. Our issues, or the issues with your parents? Kevin stood up, frustration evident. Why do you make things so hard? It's the best course of action for our family. I watched in disbelief as he stormed out. Had he really proposed spending our life savings on his parents without my consent? Feeling more alone than ever, I buried my face in my hands, wondering what would happen to us. The next morning, I heard quiet sounds from the kitchen and assumed it was Kevin and his mother. I walked down the corridor cautiously. Mom, she's being unreasonable, Kevin said. I thought she'd be pleased with this. His mother responded, Some women just can't handle the demands of raising a family. Not everyone is suited for it. Biting my lip, I felt hurt and rage battle within me. Is that how people saw me, unable to manage? I had enough. Storming into the kitchen, I confronted Kevin. For whom is this best? Both Kevin and his mother looked surprised. His mother quickly put on a smile. Good morning, dear. How was your night? Ignoring her, I focused on Kevin. Were you going to discuss this with me at all? Kevin looked embarrassed. Amelia, it's not like that. We were just talking. Talking about making big financial decisions without me? About our future and our children's? His mother tried to mediate. Let's not get too fired up. I'll take the kids to the park so you two can talk. She called for Harriet and Jason and left quickly. A sharp stillness settled between Kevin and me when the front door closed. You cannot continue doing this, I murmured. You cannot exclude me from decisions that impact our family. Kevin sighed, running his fingers through his hair. Amelia, I'm not excluding you. I'm looking for solutions. Kevin, you've been distant, I snapped. You persuaded me to quit my job, saying I needed to focus on the family. He reached for me, but I pulled away. That's not true. I thought this would help. My parents could assist with the kids. You'd get more support. More support? I laughed bitterly. Your father barely acknowledges me, and your mother can hardly hide her disdain. Kevin's face hardened. That's unfair. They've been supportive since you left work. Supportive? I sneered. They've been suffocating. You want to spend our money on them, but I can't make a single decision about our kids without your mother questioning me. He raised his hands. What else should we do with it? We need the help. I looked into his eyes and saw a stranger. Kevin, I can't do this anymore. I refuse to be excluded in my own family. His face softened. Amelia, we can fix this. We just need to. He was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening and the children's excited chatter. Daddy, Mommy, Harriet yelled, look what we found at the park. I forced a smile as our daughter ran into the kitchen, holding a shiny pebble. However, I saw Kevin's mother's rough glance above Harriet's head. She was certain that she had won this round. Silently, I vowed as I bent to gaze at Harriet's treasure, this wasn't the end. I wouldn't let them drive me away from my own family. Something needed to change quickly. Staring at the laptop screen in front of me, I sat at the kitchen table, seeing glimmers of the life I had left behind in each email and message that scrolled by. My fingers ached to write a resume so I could return to practicing law, where I had once been quite successful. The sound of Kevin's car driving into the driveway brought me back to reality. Quickly, I shut off the laptop, guilt washing over me. How did I get here? Hadn't I promised my family this? When Kevin saw me, his face lit up. There you are. Hello. How about we take the kids out to supper tonight? What do you think? I faked a laugh. That sounds fantastic. Where are the children? Mom took them to the mall. She mentioned something about new school clothes, he replied. My lips twisted into a forced smile. Did she? I thought we decided to do that together this weekend. Kevin shrugged, seemingly oblivious to my dismay. Mom offered, and I thought you'd appreciate a break. A break? As if I needed to get away from my own children. I swallowed my hurt, trying not to cry. Kevin, we need to talk about your parents, about this whole situation. His shoulders stiffened, and he groaned. Not this again, Amelia. I thought we were past this. Past me making decisions for our family? I got up, my anger boiling over. Kevin, you can't just keep making decisions on your own, especially not about our savings. He narrowed his eyes. What's that supposed to mean? I took a deep breath. Earlier, I heard you on the phone. You were talking to a real estate agent, right? Kevin looked surprised and flushed. It was just a preliminary discussion. I was gathering information. Without speaking to me first, I concluded for him. He raked a hand through his hair, frustration evident. Amelia, what do you want from me? I'm trying to act in our family's best interests. Our family, I emphasized, not the one your parents envision. Kevin, me, and the children. My parents are part of our family too. Why can't you see that? He fired back. Something inside me snapped. Because they're taking over. Your father ignores me at family dinners, and your mother constantly criticizes my parenting. And you let it happen. Kevin's face grew stern. That's unfair. They just want to help. Help? I laughed bitterly. Is that what you call it when your mother insults my parenting and your father avoids me? Kevin, am I wrong? When was the last time your parents weren't involved in a decision we made together? He opened his mouth, then closed it again, unable to respond. That's what I thought, I said, feeling my strength waning. Kevin, I can't keep living like this. There has to be a change. For a moment, I saw a glimmer of the thoughtful, kind man I had married. But then his face closed off again. You're right, something does have to change. You need to accept that this is our life now, Amelia. My parents are here to stay. We'll all be happier if you embrace that sooner rather than later. Shock and sadness filled me as I looked at him. Was this really the state of our marriage? The sound of the front door opening and the eager chatter of our kids was followed by Kevin's mother's voice. We're back. Wait until you see what we bought. Kevin turned to greet his mother and the children, giving me a look that clearly indicated our discussion was over. As I stood there, a horrifying realization overwhelmed me. This was no longer just about Kevin's parents, it was about the future of our marriage, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if it had one. I sat at the desk in our shared study, pen poised over paper, my heart thumping in my chest. The house was eerily quiet. This was it, the breaking point. I glanced at my watch. It was 2:37 a.m. with his head in the clouds. Kevin had no idea our world was about to change. The kids were safely nestled in their beds, unaware of the turmoil that had been building for months. My hand trembled as I started writing. Kevin, the kids and I will be gone by the time you read this. I can no longer live this way. Tears blurred my vision as I poured out my grief, disappointment, and betrayal onto the paper. I wrote about being ignored, about his parents' persistent interference, and about the dreams I had given up only to be treated as an outsider in my own home. I let out a sob as I signed my name at the bottom, quickly stifling it so as not to wake anyone. This was not the future we had planned together, and it was not how I had expected my life to turn out. However, things happen, people change, and sometimes you have to have the courage to alter your own narrative. I carefully folded the letter and placed it in the middle of Kevin's desk where he couldn't miss it. Quietly, I made my way upstairs to rouse the kids. "Mommy?" I shook Harriet gently awake. She murmured something sleepy. "What's wrong?" she inquired while rubbing her eyes. "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart," I lied. "We're taking a little getaway. Could you please help me with your brother, like a big girl?" Though still half asleep, she nodded. Being the lighter sleeper of the two, Jason was usually easier to wake up. In a matter of minutes, I had them both dressed and ready to leave, holding their beloved stuffed animals tightly in their arms. I held my breath as we tiptoed down the steps, hoping Kevin wouldn't wake up. His snoring from our bedroom was a comforting sound, but it also cut deeply. I no longer felt like I knew this man I had once loved more than anything. We arrived at the car without any problems. Harriet's little voice sliced through the evening air as I strapped the children into their seats. "Where's Daddy, Mommy? Isn't he coming with us?" Even though I knew the question was coming, I froze, unprepared. "No, my dear, Daddy has to stay here. But don't worry, we'll see him shortly." Even though the lie hurt my tongue, I couldn't bring myself to utterly destroy their reality, not quite yet. As I slid into the driver's seat, my attention was drawn to a movement. Kevin's mother was standing there in the upstairs window. When our gazes locked, time seemed to stop. I saw the beginning of comprehension, a spark of wrath, and then, shockingly, something that nearly seemed like satisfaction. I fired the engine and slid out of the driveway. Without thinking, I drove through the lonely dark streets with shaking palms on the steering wheel. Where were we going? How would we proceed? My head was filled with questions that felt endless. However, I felt calmer when I looked at my sleeping kids in the rearview mirror. We would work things out. It was necessary. My phone buzzed just as the first rays of dawn started to strike the sky. My blood ran cold as I saw Kevin's name flash on the screen with a sentence. "You have no right to take my kids. My attorney will be in touch. Amelia, you're not going to get away with this." My resolve strengthened, and I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. Now there was no turning back. I would confront the next challenge and any upcoming struggles for the sake of my children and myself. I allowed myself a tiny grin as the sun rose, casting a picture of opportunity and optimism over the earth. This was only the start of a new chapter in our narrative, not its conclusion. I arrived at a dilapidated motel's parking lot, fatigue filling my body. Despite the mess in our lives, the children's faces were serene as they slept soundly in the back seat. I was about to cry as I propped my head on the steering wheel when I heard a tap on the window. "Amelia, is that you?" Blinking in shock, I looked up to see my high school best friend, Jasmine, gazing through the glass, a face I hadn't seen in a long time. "Jasmine," I gasped, wiping my eyes hastily as I got out of the car. "What are you doing here?" She drew me into a close embrace. "I manage this place. But forget about me. What's happening? Are you all right?" Something inside me shattered at the concern in her voice. Before I knew it, I was crying in her arms, telling her the entire tale between sobs. With each phrase, I felt a little lighter, the weight of the past few months slowly lifting off my shoulders. Jasmine's expression became more serious as she listened. After I was done, she gave my shoulder a squeeze. "You won't remain in this hole. Come on, I'll give you my extra room." After an hour, the kids were nestled into cozy beds, and I took a seat at Jasmine's kitchen table, enjoying a warm cup of tea. "So what's your plan?" Jasmine inquired politely. Feeling confused, I gazed into my tea. "I'm not sure. I simply could not stay there any longer. However, I can see from Kevin's text that he will fight for the kids." Jasmine's eyes became stony. "Now you attack, Amelia. You've always been the sharpest person I know. You're capable of doing this." "I don't even have an attorney," I said as the truth of my position hit home. A cunning smirk appeared on Jasmine's face. "To be honest, I think I could assist with that. Do you recall Stephen from high school?" A beat skipped in my heart. Stephen was the boy I'd secretly lusted after for years. What about him? He's a divorce lawyer now, one of the best in the state, reasoned Jasmine. She paused, then took a step forward. He always had a thing for you. My cheeks began to flush, and I felt guilty. As I was leaving my spouse, I found myself blushing over a high school crush. Jasmine, I cannot afford a top-tier attorney. I moved on from everything. Jasmine dismissively waved her hand. Let me speak with him. Just get along with him, please, for me. My phone buzzed, and it was another text from Kevin before I could reply. My folks are worried. How could you harm our family in this way? I'll make sure you never see the kids again, so go home immediately. I gave Jasmine the message while shaking my hands. Her expression grew serious. That resolves the matter. Stephen is the first person I'm phoning in the morning. That night, I couldn't fall asleep. As I lay in bed, the sensation that I was perched on a cliff persisted in my mind. Meeting with Stephen seemed like the end of the road, like my marriage had officially ended. However, as I considered Kevin's icy reasons and his parents' oppressive presence, I concluded that my marriage had long since ended. I just hadn't had the guts to say it. I heard Jasmine's voice in the corridor when I woke up the following morning. Yes, Stephen, you can meet her at 2 p.m. May, thanks for it. Jasmine turned to face me as I came out of the bedroom, her expression a mix of excitement and trepidation. Amelia, Stevens agreed to meet with you today. My heart pounded. This was the turning point in my life and in my children's lives as well. Great. Astonished by the volume of my voice, I hugged my drowsy kids and got ready for the day. As I did, hope kindled in me, something I hadn't felt in years. I no longer felt alone. No matter what lay ahead, I felt ready to fight for the life I deserved for the first time in a very long time. I waited in Stephen's office, smoothing down my shirt and attempting to get my anxiety under control. It was obvious he had changed from the bashful youngster I recalled. When he stepped in, Stephen held out his hand with a confident, comforting look on his face. It's been too long, Amelia. I apologize that we have to meet in this manner. A familiar flutter emerged in my gut as we sat down, but I ignored it. This was about my future, my children's future, not about past crushes or what-ifs. Stephen listened carefully as I described my circumstances, his brow furrowing at every new detail. He leaned forward, his gaze fierce after I was done. I will not sugarcoat this, Amelia. This may turn heated, especially with Kevin's parents involved in his wealth. However, I can assure you that we will battle to the end. Something within me was sparked by his words, a fire I had long since forgotten. How do we start? We plotted for the next 60 minutes. As Stephen described our strategy, I sensed the return of my previous legal feelings. We began discussing the details when my phone beeped. I quickly looked at the screen. It's Kevin. I have to take this. As I left Stephen's office, I answered, Where are you, Amelia? Kevin's tone was composed and icy. My parents are devastated. The children must be brought home right now. Taking a deep breath, I prepared myself. No, Kevin. I'm not going to return. I've hired an attorney. Please get in touch with him for any more matters. A moment of startled silence fell. Then Kevin's voice became angry. Do you really believe you can take my kids and get away with it, Amelia? I'm going to ruin you. You'll be lucky if you see them again when I'm through. The call ended. Stephen put his hand on my shoulder, pulling me back to the present moment as I stood there trembling. Are you all right? He said, his expression filled with worry. I nodded and wiped away the tears I wasn't even aware I was shedding. Stephen, he made threats to abduct the children. How if? With his hands resting on my shoulders, he said, Hey, we will not let it occur, Amelia. You're not alone in this battle and stronger than you realize. I was overcome with feelings as I stared into his eyes, including dread, thankfulness, and something more I couldn't quite put my finger on. I took a step back and collected myself. What should we do next? Stephen's face took on a serious expression. We must apply for temporary custody right now. We also need to discuss your career, Amelia. Puzzled, I blinked. My profession. But I abandoned that. Exactly, Stephen stated in a stern tone. And in court, that will be used against us. We must demonstrate your ability to care for the kids independently. It struck me like a stone. I had sacrificed everything for my family, and now I could lose my kids because of that one sacrifice alone. With uncertainty beginning to seep in, I said, I don't know if I can go back. Stephen grew more determined. Amelia, I knew in high school that you were a determined individual who could accomplish anything. You only need to locate her again since that woman is still there. That day, when I walked out of Stephen's office, my head was spinning. Rebuilding my profession, fighting Kevin and his parents, and attempting to keep my kids safe felt like an impossible task. But I felt a glimpse of optimism for the first time in years. Harriet's big eyes met mine as I tucked her and Jason into bed that evening. When are we going home, Mama? My heart tightened. Oh, my dear, I replied, drawing her near. We're at home now. Our home is wherever we are when we are together. I vowed in silence as I held my daughter. I would build us a new home, one that was free of love, respect, and hardship. No matter how long it took or how fierce the battle was, I was prepared for the difficult path ahead. The old Amelia was coming to her senses and ready to reclaim her life. In front of me stood the courtroom, a rising reminder of the conflict I was going to engage in. Grasping my suitcase firmly, I attempted to calm my anxiety. Our interim custody court was today, and I knew that Kevin and his parents would make a big deal out of it. Stephen touched my shoulder with a kind hand. You can succeed, Amelia. Keep in mind all we've planned. I nodded, and as we stepped into the building, I inhaled deeply. I saw Kevin, his parents, and their attorney huddled together. My fury boiled at my mother-in-law's nasty expression. When the hearing started, I watched in growing terror as Kevin's attorney presented me as an unstable, careless mother who had deserted her family on a whim. They brought up my choice to resign from my position, misrepresenting it as proof that I couldn't support the kids. Stephen expertly made our case when it was our turn, emphasizing my years of successful legal profession and commitment to my kids. However, I noticed the judge's doubtful look. Uncertainty tore at me. Had I committed a grave error? I noticed Kevin's mother talking loudly in the hallway during our recess break. Naturally, as soon as we gain custody, we'll be moving in to help with the kids instead of some unstable mother who can't decide what she wants out of life. They need a secure environment. A part of me broke. I marched up to her before I had a chance to consider. How could you? I growled. From the beginning, you have been attempting to push me away. Guess what, though? I'm over being treated unfairly. I will use every ounce of might to battle you for those children of mine. Kevin's father moved to separate us. Amelia, you've gone insane. Right now, you're supporting our argument that you're unfit to be a parent. When I turned to face Jasmine, her eyes were flaming. I felt a touch on my arm. Remove yourself, she told my in-laws. You are no longer allowed to harass her. Stephen showed up as a gathering formed, and he gently drew me away. This isn't helping, Amelia. We must pay attention to the hearing. However, the harm had already been done. As soon as we entered the courtroom again, I sensed the judge's critical stare. My outburst had given Kevin the upper hand. Given the evidence submitted and the recent display in the hallway, I'm inclined to grant temporary custody to the father with supervised visits for the mother, the judge said, clearing his throat. The entire globe appeared to be tilted. My breathing stopped. This cannot be taking place. Stephen asked for a break right away, and the judge reluctantly agreed. I followed him into a private conference room in drowsiness. Amelia, pay attention to me, Stephen pleaded. We still have work to do, but we must adjust our strategy. You must demonstrate to the judge that you are a responsible, stable parent who prioritizes your kids. With tears flowing down my cheeks, I gave a mute nod. However, Stephen, how are they going to take my babies? I can't let them go. His gaze was fierce as he held on to my shoulders. I need you to get yourself together because we are going to fight this. I know the Amelia who never gives up. She refuses to be bullied by anyone. Where's that Amelia? His comments ignited a flame of purpose within me, piercing through my sadness. I straightened my back as I wiped my eyes. She is here, and she is prepared for battle. I saw Kevin and his parents as we were about to enter the courtroom again, and their arrogant looks strengthened my determination. This was no longer just about me. It was also about proving to my kids what it meant to stand up for oneself and escape their hold on me. After inhaling deeply, I squared my shoulders. The conflict had not ended. It was only getting started, and this time, I was prepared for battle. With my pulse racing, I watched the judge get ready to hand down his decision in the courtroom. It had taken months of struggles, restless nights, and unwavering resolve to get to this point. Seated on the other side were Kevin and his parents, their expressions a mix of hate and confidence. The judge's voice echoed through the hushed chamber as he spoke. This court has carefully considered all presented evidence in the matter of custody for Jason and Harriet. Feeling Stephen's comforting presence alongside me, I held my breath. The world appeared to stop when the judge announced that Amelia Matthews would receive primary custody and that Kevin Matthews would have significant visitation rights. As the court proceeded to go over the specifics of the custody agreement, I could only concentrate on the tremendous sensation of relief and vindication that rushed over me. I heard Kevin's mother gasp and saw Kevin's face crumple in shock. Stephen looked up at me. His smile was contagious, encouraging, and more than that, it made my heart skip a beat. Kevin came over to me outside the courthouse, his parents watching from a distance. "Amelia, I'm sorry for everything," he murmured quietly. I nodded, astonished that I didn't feel angry. "I apologize as well, Kevin, but this is best for all of us." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders as they left. Not only had I prevailed in the custody dispute, but I also won my independence. Jasmine came running up and gave me a bear hug. "You succeeded, girl. I knew you could." I laughed so hard that happy tears ran down my cheeks. "Jasmine, without you, I could not have succeeded. You gave me hope when I had none that night at the hotel, and you rescued me." She gave my hand a squeeze. "That is the purpose of friends. Go now and enjoy the occasion with your children and perhaps a specific attractive lawyer." I looked at Stephen, who was putting his briefcase away, and his face flushed. My gut gave me that recognizable flutter as our eyes locked. After a happy reunion with Harriet and Jason later that evening, I sat on Jasmine's porch and watched the sunset. Stephen came over to join me, holding 2 glasses of wine. He handed me a glass and said, "To new beginnings." I grinned and gently tapped my glass against his. "Towards fresh starts." Stephen finally said something after a little period of comfortable silence. "You know, Amelia, from what I've seen these past few months, you're amazing. I can see that you've changed from that first day when you came into my office because of the way you battled for yourself and your kids." I nodded, a wave of pride rising within me. "I'm not. I just discovered aspects of myself I had assumed were lost forever." Stephen reached out to touch me, and his touch ignited something within me. "Maybe we could grab dinner sometime, just the 2 of us, now that the dust has settled." I saw warmth, adoration, and the potential for more as I gazed into his eyes. I paused for a second, old worries threatening to come back, but then I remembered all that I had accomplished and all that I had conquered. "Yes, please," I murmured quietly. I thought back on my journey, including the hardships, times of hopelessness, and agony that had led me here. As the last of the sunshine illuminated the sky in dazzling hues, I realized this was where they had all led. I had regained my strength, my freedom, and a network of support I never realized I needed. Even though the future was still unknown, I felt optimistic about it for the first time in a long time. I still had my independence, my kids, and maybe a future worth of love ahead of me. This wasn't simply the end, this was only the beginning. As I savored my wine and felt Stephen's warm hand in mine, I understood that this was my start, and I was prepared to enjoy every second of it.